Okay, so I want to start with a phrase that, I mean, you've heard it a million times, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's been cross-stitched onto pillows, it's on mugs.
Everywhere.
You are not your job.
Yeah.
You are not your bank account. You are not your stress.
It's basically the golden rule of modern spirituality.
It really is. It's this idea that there's a fundamental split between you, the conscious awareness, and your life situation.
Right. Which is just the messy stuff you're wading through at any given moment. It's the Eckhart Tolle distinction. You've got life with a capital L, which is deep and timeless.
And then you have this situation.
And the whole promise is that if you can just, separate the two, you find peace.
And that usually works. I mean, I've used it when I'm stuck in airport security. I tell myself, I am not this line. And honestly, my blood pressure drops.
It does work for that. It's a great tool for small-scale frustrations.
But today, we're doing a deep dive into an essay that suggests this very coping mechanism might actually be, well, gaslighting us.
It is a heavy hitter today, for sure. We are looking at a piece by the writer and philosopher Pedro Malha, and it's called When Life Situation is Your Life.
Hmm, just the title.
Yeah, and he argues that while the distinction is great for minor annoyances, it completely breaks down when you are dealing with, say, structural tragedy or systemic restriction.
So Malha is basically asking, what happens when your situation isn't just a story you're telling yourself, but a cage you're actually locked inside of? Because if you tell someone in a cage you are not the bars, they might feel a moment of peace, sure, but they're still not going anywhere.
That is the absolute crux of it. So today we're going to look at why we're so kind of addicted to this separation, why it fails when the problems are structural, and then look at Malha's work with the ghost movement,
Okay.
which offers a really different, and I gotta say, kind of stark way of existing in a difficult world.
Okay, but before we get to the critique, we have to admit why this whole life versus life situation model is so popular. Malha doesn't just dismiss it, right? He gets why it's appealing.
Oh, absolutely. He calls it seductive, and for good reason. Its main function is to give you immediate psychological distance.
Right.
Think about anxiety. Anxiety is usually an interpretive layer we add to reality. So you get a short email from your boss.
The one-word email.
A one-word email, exactly. The reality is just pixels on a screen. The situation is, I have an email. But the interpretation,
The interpretation is, I'm getting fired, I'm incompetent, my whole life is falling apart.
the spiral.
The spiral. And this life versus situation tool, it acts like a circuit breaker. It lets you step back and say, okay, the email's happening, but I am the awareness observing the email.
And that creates this sense of, I don't know, invulnerability.
That's the drug,
Yeah.
yes. It promises that there's a part of you, like an inner citadel, that cannot be touched by all the chaos out there.
Which, in this world, is incredibly valuable.
Incredibly, Malha says it loosens the grip of interpretation. If you aren't your situation, then your situation can't destroy you. It gives you a stable place to stand.
That's a mental armor.
It is. But, and this is where I sometimes struggle with it, doesn't that become a bit of a delusion? Like if I'm drowning and I tell myself, I am not the water, that's nice and all, but I'm still drowning.
Yes.
At what point does the mental armor become a blindfold?
That is exactly the pivot point of Malha's essay.
Yeah.
He says this entire spiritual framework rests on one huge unexamined assumption,
Which is,
that the pressure we feel is primarily internal.
meaning
Yeah,
we assume the suffering is coming from our reaction to the event, not the event itself.
correct. The standard mindfulness model says if you just remove the narrative pressure, the worry, the story, then the suffering goes away. And Malha says, sure, that works for traffic jam.
Right.
It works for rude emails.
Yeah.
But then he introduces this idea of structural pressure.
Okay, let's drill down on that. What's the difference between structural pressure and just having a really, really bad day?
Structural pressure is about limits that exist before you even think about them, and they continue to exist after you've reached a state of perfect Zen calm.
Okay.
The clearest example he uses is time.
Time. Yeah, time is a finite resource. He writes, a person can understand their situation clearly and still have no more time available.
Wow.
Imagine a single parent working 3 jobs. They literally have 16 hours of labor to do in a 14-hour window. They can be perfectly mindful. They can breathe into the present moment. They can drop all their stories about it.
But the math doesn't change.
The math is absolute. The lack of time isn't a story they're telling themselves. It's a structural wall. And this is where Malha says the spiritual advice becomes, frankly, toxic.
Because if you tell that person, you're just identifying with your situation, You're completely missing the point.
You're fundamentally misunderstanding their reality.
That feels almost cruel. It's like telling someone with a broken leg that their pain is just a construct. I mean, yeah, pain signals are interpreted by the brain, but the bone is still snapped.
That's a perfect analogy. The bone is still snapped.
Yeah.
Mala says that these structural conditions, poverty, chronic illness, systemic discrimination, they determine the very conditions of your experience. They're not just thoughts floating by. They're the weather. They're the gravity.
Exactly. They're the gravity.
So if I'm understanding this, the life versus situation distinction is great for, let's say, neurotic suffering, the stuff we invent. But it fails completely for structural suffering, the stuff the world imposes on us.
That's a great way to summarize it. But Malha takes it a step further. He warns that when we try to apply the neurotic solution to the structural problem, we create a dangerous hierarchy.
A hierarchy? You mean like ranking life as more important than situation?
Yes. In so much of the spiritual community, the situation is seen as this messy, low vibration thing. It's the mud. And life, the awareness, is the beautiful lotus.
Oh, totally. You're taught to transcend the situation, right? To see it as secondary. If you're too worried about your rent, that's a sign you're not evolved enough. You're too attached.
And that is where the real psychological damage can happen. Malha calls this the trap for the constrained. If you have heavy constraints, say you're navigating a broken healthcare system, and you try to treat that as secondary, you're just fighting reality.
It's not secondary at all.
It dictates your life. It dictates if you sleep, if you eat, if you live.
So what happens when you fail to transcend it?
You blame yourself. And this, for me, is the darkest part of his essay. When awareness doesn't fix the problem, people don't think, oh, maybe this tool is wrong for this problem.
No, they think, I'm doing it wrong.
I'm doing it wrong.
I'm not meditating enough. I'm not letting go properly.
Exactly. Malha writes, what remains heavy can begin to be interpreted as a failure of awareness. So now you have the original problem, let's say it's debt, and you've added a second layer on top.
Spiritual shame.
Spiritual shame. You feel like a failure because you can't mindfulness your way out of a mathematical deficit.
Wow. It effectively privatizes a systemic issue. So instead of looking at the economy and saying, this is broken, I look at myself and say, my chakras are blocked.
Privatizes the problem. That's
Yeah.
a brilliant way to put it. And that's why Masa says we have to dismantle this hierarchy. We have to stop pretending that awareness is the master and situation is the servant. Sometimes the situation is the master.
That is a very hard pill for the self-help world to swallow. We love the idea of being the masters of our own destiny.
Yes.
But where does that leave us? I mean, if the answer is just structural pressure is real and you can't think it away, that sounds an awful lot like despair. Life sucks and then you die.
It does sound like despair if you're hooked on the idea of total control. But Maha offers an alternative, and it comes from his work with something called the Ghosts Movement.
The Ghosts Movement. I want to ask about this. It's such an evocative name.
Yeah.
What is it exactly?
It's a nonprofit and sort of a philosophical collective he works with. The name Ghosts implies a few things. It refers to people who feel invisible within the machinery of society, but it also refers to a specific way of existing. Being a witness to a life that you cannot fully control, like a ghost haunting a house. You are present, you are seeing everything, but you cannot move the furniture.
That sounds, well, haunting, literally, but also, in a weird way, kind of peaceful.
It is a radical shift. The Ghosts framework is about coexistence, not transcendence. So instead of trying to rise above your situation, you learn to stand next to it.
Okay, what's the practical application of that? How do I stand next to a situation that feels like it's crushing me?
It starts by accepting 3 very hard truths that Malha lays out. And I'm going to read them because they're really stark.
Good for it.
1, awareness does not remove constraint. 2, clarity does not cancel consequence. And 3, presence does not equal freedom.
Presence does not equal freedom. Wow, that goes against every meditation app advertisement I have ever seen.
It is the complete antithesis. But think about the relief in that statement. It validates the experience of anyone listening who is doing everything right. They're meditating, journaling, going to therapy, and they're still stuck.
Right.
Maha is saying you can be fully present, you can be perfectly clear-headed, and you can still have 0 options.
It takes the idea of failure off the table.
Precisely. It's not a failure of your spirit, it's a reality of the structure. The expert in me just loves this because it's so intellectually honest. It visualizes our existence not as like a ladder you climb to enlightenment.
And then the mess behind.
Right. It's more like two parallel tracks running at the same time.
Two tracks.
On one track, you have your life situation. It might be chaotic, unfair, painful. And then on the other track, you have your awareness. You're observing the chaos. You're breathing. You're not adding extra panic to it.
But, and this is the key difference, the piece on the awareness track doesn't magically bleed over and fix the situation track.
Yeah. Exactly. They coexist. You can feel the peace of a deep breath while also acknowledging that the deadline is impossible. You don't have to pretend the deadline doesn't matter just to take a breath.
So it's the difference between everything is fine and I am fine, even though everything is definitely not fine.
Or even just, I am not fine, and the situation is not fine, and I'm observing both of those facts without lying to myself about them. That's the ghost's approach. It's about witnessing the tragedy of your own constraints without that frantic need to reframe it as a learning opportunity.
Okay, I have to ask though, isn't there a huge risk here? If we just accept that structural pressure is real and often unmovable, doesn't that lead to passivity? Like, oh, well, I have no options, guess I'll just sit here and be a ghost.
It's a great question, and Mala flips it on its head. He actually argues that the current model, the one where we try to mindfulness our way out of stress, is the truly passive one.
Also.
Because it treats the situation as something to be ignored or reframed. If I can convince myself that my terrible job is just a spiritual curriculum for my ego, I'm much more likely to stay in that terrible job.
You are. You're using spirituality as a sedative. You anesthetize yourself against the very structure that's harming you. Mala asks, what if we stopped doing that?
Yeah.
What if we allowed ourselves to feel the full, crushing weight of the structural pressure?
Then we might actually get angry enough to try and break the structure.
Right. If you start blaming yourself for your burnout, oh, I just need to be more resilient, you can finally place the blame where it actually belongs, on the system that is burning you out.
So the ghost approach isn't about giving up at all. It's about getting a clearer diagnosis. If I stop trying to fix my attitude toward the problem, I might realize the problem requires a sledgehammer, not a meditation cushion.
That is the provocative thought I want to leave our listeners with. We so often use awareness to make unacceptable lives acceptable. We smooth over the sharp edges of reality with positive vibes. But Mala suggests that true clarity, the kind the ghost movement advocates for, is about seeing the sharp edges for exactly what they are. It changes the whole question. It's no longer, how do I find peace inside this cage?
No.
It's, how do I recognize that this is empirically a cage?
And maybe, just maybe, that clear-eyed acknowledgement is the first real step toward finding the key. Or at the very least, stopping the exhausting work of pretending the bars are made of light.
Stop pretending the bars are made of light.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us really needed to hear that. It's scary to let go of that "it's all in my head" safety blanket, but it sounds necessary if we want to live in the real world.
It is scary, but it's also grounding. You can finally stop fighting a war on two fronts. You can stop fighting the world, and you can stop fighting yourself for struggling with the world.
That is a powerful place to land. Peter Mala's essay, When Life Situation is Your Life, it's a reality check, but a surprisingly compassionate one. Thank you for walking us through that.
My pleasure. It's good to look at the walls sometimes, not just the window.
And thank you to everyone listening to The Deep Dive. If you're feeling the weight of your situation today, just remember, it's not all in your head. Sometimes it's just in your life. And that's okay. We'll see you next time.